When most people think a game is based on the popular Doom engine, the same titles always come up: Doom, Doom 2, Heretic, and Hexen. And it's no surprise either, as all of these titles were released to a generally favourable reception, and in most cases evolved the Doom formula in some way. However, perhaps the largest evolution was also the least well known in 1996's Strife. Welcome, my name's AZAsh and welcome to another PC game retrospective video. Now, there are some people that believe that System Shock was the first PC first-person RPG. However, I am not one of these people, and I personally believe that while System Shock was an excellent game, it lacked any real RPG elements, at least until its sequel in 1999. What I believe was the first PC first-person RPG was 1996's Strife. Strife, while based on the Doom engine, couldn't be any further from the systems and mechanics which popularised Doom. Yes, there's plenty of shooting in Strife, but there's far more depth to the overall gameplay. A mostly open world to explore, player attributes to increase, side quests, trading, branching narratives, and a memorable cast of NPCs all make Strife feel more like an RPG first and a shooter second. Strife released to generally favourable reviews, but didn't really get much credit for its accomplishments. And look, I think part of the reason for this was that it released in one of the most crowded years of PC gaming, with blockbusters like Duke Nukem 3D, Red Alert, and Alien Trilogy all releasing in 1996. And unlike Strife, all of these had fairly strong existing franchises to draw on, complete with extensive marketing budgets. However, despite never reaching critical acclaim upon its initial release, it was the subject of a Night Dive Studios remaster in 2014, known as Strife Veterans Edition, and this is the version we are playing today. The remaster retains virtually all of the core mechanics and systems, but includes support for widescreen resolutions, enhanced lighting, and some quality of life items like the ability to rebind keys and have objectives marked on the minimap. Now, if you want the 100% authentic original experience, the Veterans Edition does include the original DOS game, but for the vast majority of the people, the remaster is going to be the one you want to play. The story in Strife is excellent, to the extent that I am deliberately going to be vague here, as well as not include any late game video content, because honestly, it's a great story experience. The premise for the story is that many years ago, a comet impacted the planet and brought with it a deadly virus. Millions of people died from this virus, but some others started hearing voices in their head of a godlike being. Those who heard these voices formed an organization called the Order and effectively enslaved all those who could not hear the voices. The player, operating as somewhat of a mercenary, hears about a resistance movement against the Order called the Front and decides to join, being sent on a variety of missions with the objective of crippling the Order. There's a main storyline as well as many side quests which can be completed to receive either items or stat boosts, the latter being virtually required to progress through some of the game's later stages. There's also a fair bit of player choice in how you go about completing the game's missions. Take, for example, an early conversation with the town's corrupt mayor. He gives you the choice of two jobs he needs doing. One is messy, one is bloody. Of course, I tell him I want the bloody one, and he tells me that a warehouse worker named Derwin has been selling children to the Order without sharing a cut with him. He asks for Derwin to be killed and his ear be brought back as proof. Fast forward to the warehouse and I locate Derwin and he offers to buy me off if I turn a blind eye. Of course, I'm not having any of this and I eliminate Derwin and return to the mayor with his ear. This isn't an isolated passage of play, and player choice is something that continues throughout the game, with many of your actions having lasting impacts on how other parts of the game play out. Another example is an early mission where you are presented with the opportunity to steal a golden chalice, which if you go and visit the mayor before disposing of, are called a thief and thrown in jail, requiring a jailbreak. Now, the overall game narrative is propelled through a mixture of excellent voice acting and hand-drawn art, with some environmental storytelling also appearing from time to time. While the game lacks 3D cutscenes, What's Here does a really good job of getting you invested in the overall plot. Before we continue, a massive thank you to those who support the channel. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider liking the video or subscribing to the channel. With that out of the way, let's grab our crossbow, equip some armor, and head back to 1996 to remember Strife. Strife's gameplay loop revolves around two main components: exploring and interacting in the somewhat open world, and following the main story quests, which can have an impact on the open world by opening new areas and changing existing areas. For a relatively short adventure by modern RPG standards, the game does a great job of rewarding exploration, with everything from finding new side quests to having conversations which can lead to uncovering secrets. All of the game world is also persistent, meaning that if you do something to someone, they will remember for the duration of the game, meaning that there is a cost to transgressions, although one that can be overcome with a fairly generous quick save system. Oh, and let's not forget this guy, who promises to help you with some information in exchange for some gold. What's the information? Be stealthy when you kill and you won't set off alarms. Right, thanks. Can I have a refund, please? Now, on the surface, you wouldn't think that basing a game on the Doom engine, which requires extensive exploration, would be a good idea. But what's here is a fairly heavily modified version of that engine, featuring full mouse look and jumping, and for the most part, it works pretty well. Camera and control are generally quite good, although not perfect. More on this in a moment. The game features a very fast default movement speed, which helps making navigating the game world fairly brief and reducing downtime between exploration and combat. There is some platforming here, but it's all pretty easy, and thanks to the tight controls, I never once had an issue. Where the control doesn't always work perfectly is in selected combat situations. And look, I'm going to highlight examples of where it doesn't work here, but for the most part, it does work very well. First, to explain the challenge a little easier, I need to first explain the game's stat systems, of which there are two: accuracy and health. As a more casual RPG player, I like the fact there are only two stats to worry about, and they have very easy to understand benefits. Upgrade health and your maximum health increases. Upgrade accuracy and your weapon accuracy increases. You can upgrade these stats in a few ways, such as visiting specific locations and completing specific side quests. Now, on the topic of accuracy, Strife uses your accuracy value to determine how likely your shots are to hit their target. And like I said, this works well most of the time, but when you fire a slower projectile weapon, it locks onto where the enemy is at the moment you press fire. However, if an enemy is crawling towards you on the ceiling, as an example, the shots will constantly miss, as they'll be targeting the place the enemy's been, as opposed to where the enemy is going. From what I could tell, this is slightly improved by upgrading accuracy, but it still presented a challenge for the majority of the adventure, requiring you to either force the enemy to drop down or use another weapon such as the assault rifle. The other area which can be tricky is engaging enemies shooting from holes in the roof, who can often hit you before your auto-aim can lock onto them, requiring you to close in quickly to be able to target and defeat them. I get the idea that this was possibly a limitation of the game engine more than anything else, but given that it only comes up a handful of times as an issue, it probably isn't going to be something troubling your average player. While there was no doubt some limitations presented by using the aging Doom engine, there is likewise some very impressive things on display. There was a section about halfway through the game where I entered an area with what looked like a glass window to the area outside. I thought to myself, there's no way I can destroy this window and jump outside, but I'll give it a go. So I shot a rocket at the window, and not only did the window shatter, but the rocket continued its trajectory out the window and hit a wall in the distance. I know this sounds elementary in modern times, but in 1996, this level of environmental engagement wasn't common in PC gaming, let alone PC gaming based on the Doom engine. Another thing I found particularly impressive was the fact that you can fight alongside allies in particular missions, and even have some spawn in by using a particular item. And look, full transparency here, when I first encountered these allies, I thought they were enemies and went around massacring them, until I realised they were not shooting back. And look, I didn't realise they were allies, because once again, in a Doom engine game, this just wasn't something I was expecting. Outside of the technical flourishes, general combat is really good, with a fairly varied weapon roster as well as enemies which have different weaknesses, requiring you to constantly change up your tactics. You can also sometimes choose a stealthy approach or a more action-focused approach, with each having their unique advantages. Although some sections do require more of an action-focused approach, so I wouldn't really suggest that you can accomplish a full stealth playthrough. Regardless of the approach though, you often find yourself navigating quite large and complex maps, which practically demand the use of the in-game map to understand where you need to go. This is a good map implementation. It's not intrusive while still requiring skill to navigate with it. And yeah, on the topic of skill, Strife has an interesting pacing curve. The first half of the game can pretty much be breezed through without worrying too much about stats and stocking up on particular items. However, about halfway through, there is a massive skill check which honestly shocked me on my first playthrough. What makes this skill check particularly impactful is it creeps up on you very quickly during one of the missions, and this caused me a lot of struggles. There was a time where I was down to 15 health and desperately looking for a health kit. However, between me and the exit to the area was a turret. Here's a quick snapshot of how well I did.
I thought you were...
Now look, I eventually passed this area by doing some fancy running and jumping and found a medkit, but the point is, up to about 10 minutes earlier, I was cruising through with medkits to spare. The moral of the story here is preparation becomes a lot more important as you progress through the game. There are a few areas of the game which I don't think worked as well as the developers had perhaps hoped. The first is the entire sewer level. Okay, so I'll be honest, I hate sewer levels in games. They're often complex, poorly lit, and feature all manners of creatures trying to kill you. But my main issue in Strife is the implementation of the environmental suit, which I find is unusual to say the least. So in the sewer, there's a lot of toxic waste. When exposed to toxic waste for more than 30 seconds, you start to take damage. You can mitigate this with an environmental suit, but that only lasts for 80 seconds, of which there is no timer, so you just need to count in your head or wait until the screen starts flashing green, indicating you're about to take damage. You can hold a total of 5 suits at a time. The premise is okay, but I just feel like the execution is needlessly complicated. The other issue is the grenade launcher, and again, the implementation is unusual to say the least. So the grenade launcher launches 2 grenades per shot about 1 second apart, with them launching from opposite sides of the weapon, meaning that if you move directly after the first launching, there's a good chance that the second one might ricochet back towards you. Now this is a double-edged sword. Grenades and fire in general do extreme damage to the player, however they can also do extreme damage to the enemies, meaning that once you do finally master the weapon's usage, it can become extremely deadly. Overall, gameplay is excellent and really set the benchmark for the systems and mechanics that could work in a first-person RPG. Right, so let's address the elephant in the room with presentation. When the game released in 1996, it looked visually dated. When you put this next to something like Quake or even Duke Nukem 3D, remaster or not, it looks dated. However, the silver lining here is that the general art direction and assets are quite good. I would even go as far to say that this is the best looking Doom engine game by a fair margin. The game is also very consistent and has a very polished feeling about it. Nothing feels like it was rushed or corners cut. Everything about the game's presentation feels purposeful. In playthroughs of both the original and remaster, I never encountered any bugs, and performance was also flawless for the entire experience. Sound design is overall good, which is broken down into an average yet serviceable soundtrack for the time, combined with good effects and exceptional voice acting. Honestly, the voice acting in this game is one of the highest standards I have seen in a video game, let alone one of this era. All of the voice acting really helps to bring the environments and characters to life, and considering the graphical handicap the game suffers, it does a great job of raising the overall presentation bar. Let's have a quick listen.
Listen, if this comm unit is working, that means you're still 100% human. I've been ordered to bring you in. We're talking trust here. Betray me and pay. Oh, And by the way, head over to the old town hall. After the Order bombed it, Maso had a tunnel built that lets us get in and out without the Acolyte's knowledge.
Tell you what, there's a lying sack named Derwin who has been selling children to the Order. I won't tolerate that kind of depravity, not without my cut. Derwin works in the warehouse. Kill him and bring me his ear, and I'll see what I can do.
Now, growing up, I don't even remember hearing about this game. Maybe I just missed it, or perhaps it was lost in a sea of other releases in 1996. I don't know. But what I do know is that playing it over 25 years after its original release, on a game engine that is over 30 years old, I didn't expect to enjoy it. I assumed that it would not have aged well, required the constant use of the manual, as some of the games of this era did, and needed a lot of grinding to progress. But I was wrong, and I was very happy to be wrong, as it meant I could enjoy a game in modern times that I know my younger self would have loved. If you like first-person RPGs and prioritize gameplay over graphics, I think there's a really good chance you might enjoy Strife. And with the remaster available from a variety of online platforms, there's never been an easier way to play it. But that's enough from me. Do you agree or disagree with my opinions? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.